The rotor wash hammered the landing pad in a ragged circle of spray and grit, but no one came out to greet us. Typhon Station squatted at the edge of the peninsula, steel-ribbed walls, smoked polymer windows, and a single floodlight that twitched in a slow mechanical pulse like a dying heartbeat. I counted 30 seconds after touchdown before the pilot signaled all clear. Even with the engines idling, the only sound beyond the blades was the hush of the ocean. No gulls, no wind chimes from the weather masts, just the hollow hush of water tugging at pilings. It was a quiet so absolute it felt predatory. We were 5, contracted by the same subsidiary that had bankrolled the place. Dr. Vera Song, soft-spoken pathologist. Mason Ridge, systems engineer with a gift for profanity. Annika Hussain, field medic who'd patched gunshot wounds in 3 continents. Christine Brandt, corporate liaison wearing a jacket worth more than my truck. And me, Elias Ward, extraction specialist, which meant ex-military with just enough conscience left to pick my jobs carefully. Our brief was loose: communications failure, possible biohazard, secure data, recover personnel. The helicopter rose behind us and peeled east, shrinking into the gray. We were alone before the echo had time to fade. The main gate yawned open. The mag bolts blackened and curled outward, as if scraped by something hot enough to make steel flow like wax. Mason ran gloved fingers along the blistered edge. "Plasma cutter?" he muttered, then shook his head. "No, cutter leaves striations. This is slump. Heat without direction." He looked at me, and for a moment the crags in his face rearranged into actual worry. Inside the airlock, emergency LEDs cast a meat-red glow. The pressure equalization hissed. Automated sprayers coughed once dry. Whatever power still bled through the circuits wasn't enough to run the decon protocols. Vera tapped her tablet against the wall panel. "Main grid's on reserve. Something's pulling 6 times baseline draw. Sectioned off near Central Lab." "That where the tank is?" I asked. She nodded. "Containment 3 billions, the big one. They called it the well." Annika checked her Geiger counter anyway, old habits, and the needle stayed calm. "At least it's not hot," she said. "Just creepy. Hallways forked like capillaries, each with its own smear of damage. Some doors hung half-melted. Others were intact but remained sealed, their biometric readers looping frozen status screens. We passed labs littered with toppled centrifuges, charred desks, and flash-frozen slides still hushed beneath dry ice. In one office, a mug sat beside a half-eaten protein bar. Fibers still flaked across the keys of an abandoned log-in screen. Everything felt left mid-sentence. It took us 30 minutes to reach security control, a glass box overlooking the main laboratory floor. Racks of rifles lined one wall. Every chamber was full, but the lock panel lay in 2 pieces on the floor, its ceramic face half dissolved. "Somebody tried to break in, couldn't, and left," Mason said. "Why leave the weapons?" Christine asked, voice carefully neutral. Mason shrugged. "Maybe they realized guns wouldn't help." Vera activated the central holo console by hardwiring her tablet. Mosaic feeds flickered, empty corridors, lab benches, a cafeteria where chairs were stacked with neat paranoia. Then feed 7 hissed alive and everybody leaned forward at once. The camera looked across containment 3B. A cylindrical tank rose from reinforced floor plates, 7 meters tall, 5 wide chevron bands of glass and carbon steel braced in octagonal ribs. A halo of sodium lamps still burned overhead, but half were shattered, glass glittering on the graded catwalk that circled the vessel. The tank was empty. More precisely, it held only a residue, a pearlescent film drifting in viscous swirls like oil on water. Where one of the upper ribs met the glass, a blackened hole gaped, edges sagging outward toward the catwalk rail. It reminded me of exit wounds on armored vehicles, pressure turned inside out. Beneath, a puddle of congealed fluid oozed across floor tiles in dried ridges. The security log showed chronological chaos, alerts firing, clearing, then looping back as if someone kept resetting the system. Final entry, 11:04 p.m., 72 hours ago, read simply specimen 9 not compliant. Initiate bleed protocol. After that, silence. Christine exhaled slowly. Front office wants IP and tissue samples. They never said anything about creature retrieval. They never do, I said, and slung my carbine. We established a rally point in security, killed the upstream breakers to give ourselves a blackout buffer, and descended the stairwell to laboratory level. Each level down dropped the temperature 2 degrees. Pipes overhead sweated onto polished concrete. At the base, a fire door had been dented from the inside but not breached. Scorched prints bloomed outward on the paint. 3 digits, wide span, no thumb. Doors to containment 3B eased open on hydraulic groans. The smell hit first. Iodine and seawater spoiled under halogen. Annika gagged behind her respirator. The central tank towered over us, silent. The hole now a yawning mouth, 30 centimeters across. Glass had bubbled into teardrops before fracturing, the edges rounded, suggesting the breach happened when surfaces were viscous. Whatever heat did that had dissipated without scorching the distant ceiling. Mason stepped onto the grated catwalk, light from his shoulder lamp lancing through the breach. The interior walls were scored in looping spirals of melted polymer. Temperature sensors peg at 15 Celsius in here now, he said, but the system logs show a spike to 150, then crashed to sub-zero, like it made its own weather. Vera knelt where the puddle ended, scraping a shard into a vial. No hemoglobin, she murmured, but protein chains are there. Long repeating loops with no terminator codon. It just keeps coding itself. Regeneration, Christine said, almost reverent. Self-referential biology on infinite repeat. No top end, Vera agreed. Imagine a lizard tail that regrows so fast it outruns the predator, and then the tail starts hunting. I slid my weapon's muzzle through the hole, sweeping the tank's interior. The light caught deep gouges in the floor plate. Whatever escaped had carved footholds. Tracks? I asked. Leading away, Annika called from below. She'd found them, smears of the same pearlescent residue mixed with brittle flakes of what looked like glassy charcoal. The trail wound toward Service Tunnel A, maintenance shafts running the station's spine. While Mason patched a drone to crawl ahead, I reviewed the station schematic etched on the wall. Service tunnel paralleled the power conduit to the geothermal exchangers. Warmth, water, dark, perfect lair. I signaled the team. We formed up. The tunnel entrance loomed like a throat, lined with cable trays and moaning with recycled air. Emergency strobes pulsed amber. Each pulse briefly painted handprints along the walls, a child's finger painting in liquid silver, then gone in the dark between flashes. The prints overlapped, some vertical, some sideways, each with 3 long digits that tapered to needle points. No suction cups, no pads, something agile enough to run walls. 15 meters in, the drone's feed fuzzed. Mason cursed and tapped controls. The last frame it sent showed a junction panel peeled open, copper conductors gnawed into lace. Then static. We advanced, hearts drumming in the spaces our boots left. Sound carried oddly here. Voices seemed to hover a second too long before fading. I realized the ventilation fans were off. Only the sucking of our respirators broke the hush. Beyond the junction, the floor pitched downward in a gentle slope. Water beaded on the concrete, trembling with every step. Maybe 5 minutes later, we reached a junction bay the size of a studio apartment. Power conduits met here, in a tree of bus bars. At the center rose a stainless steel maintenance ladder leading to an upper mezzanine. The ladder's rungs were warped, metal thinning in the middle as if heat had licked straight through. Above, something rasped, like wet sand dragged across slate, then stilled. I signaled lights off. Beams winked out one by one, leaving only Annika's IR painter. The mezzanine burned cold green in night vision. For several seconds the rail appeared empty. Then shapes unfolded from the ducting, filaments, translucent, uncoiling like sea anemone arms. They waved, tasting the air. Where the infrared hit, they retracted. I felt my pulse slam at the base of my skull. Those weren't feelers, they were veins. External, searching, each lined with shimmering nodes that pulsed faintly. Specimen 9, Vera whispered. One filament dipped to the ladder's highest intact rung. A node brightened, split, and another arm budded from its side like mitosis in fast forward. We watched the growth, 5 centimeters in the span of my breath. Regenerative biology, yes, but accelerated beyond anything I'd read outside fiction. The filament hesitated, then withdrew deeper into the duct. Something heavier shifted behind it, mass-displacing cables with a slow hydraulic groan. A pressure wave fanned down the ladder, warm, humid, carrying a smell like crushed algae. I was hitting transmit to order fallback when the mezzanine rail shrieked, bolts sheared, a length of pipe toppled, struck the floor and detonated sparks across the water. Light hit the chamber in stroboscopic bursts, metallic sinews sliding along girders, droplets pattering like rain then reversing upward as they were reabsorbed, and, for an instant, an ocular structure. No iris, only a glossy hemisphere that dilated into a pit absorbing the sparks before they touched it. Then the thing vanished up the secondary duct, with a clatter of panels slamming closed behind. The silence after felt deeper than before. Water dripped slow and thick. Mason broke it. "We need fire," he said, voice clipped. "If bullets won't slow it, heat might. Or feed it," Vera countered. Glass melted around it once. Thermal gradients could be part of its life cycle. "Electricity, then," I said, pointing at the bus bars. "We rig a trap. Lure it where the current's highest. Fry the junction. Bring the ceiling down if we have to." Christine looked like she might protest corporate property loss, then thought better of it. "Data first," she insisted. "We pull every drive, every physical log. Proof of concept is worth billions, creature or not." Annika scanned the corridor behind us. "Proof won't matter if we're pulp on a wall. We block that duct now." They all looked at me. Outside the military, you don't often get unanimous stares demanding the same decision. I weighed options and tasted metallic fear in my mouth. "We split," I said. "Mason and Vera with me to rig the kill box. Christine and Annika sweep admin for drives. We meet back at security in 90 minutes. Nobody engages until I give the word." Christine opened her mouth. Shadows flickered behind her eyes, then nodded. We synchronized chronos, shared tracker beacons, and moved. I led my pair back through the tunnel, the echo of our steps hollow in a station that felt suddenly too organic, as though the walls flexed when we weren't looking. Behind, the dark swallowed the mezzanine again, but I could still smell the algae tang. By the time we reached the lab floor, condensation veiled the tank's glass. It reminded me of an oversized lung still trying to breathe. Mason headed to the junction cabinets, tracing circuits. Vera crouched at the trail's edge with a new sample kit, tongue between her teeth in concentration. I started clearing debris from around the power trunk. For a few minutes, adrenaline cooled into grim focus. Then the lights flickered. 3 pulses. The emergency klaxon coughed to life somewhere distant, choked, and died. Overhead, a relay bank hammered closed. Power readings on Mason's tablet spiked into red as something upstream began feeding on the grid. A distant boom trembled through the concrete, followed by the slow, awful sound of metal bending in the dark. "Ward," Mason said quietly. "It's learning where the juice is." Vera straightened, face pale behind her visor. "We're not hunting it," she said. "It's hunting our energy. We're the generators, warm, conductive, full of sodium and water. We're portable batteries." I heard, but my mind tracked another detail. 3 pulses in the lights, the universal signal for system reboot, but none of us had initiated one. Whatever grew in that tank had fingers in the wiring now, maybe in the coolant, maybe in every drip that fell from the ceiling. And it was counting down to something. The floor vibrated again, heavier, closer. Annika's voice crackled over comms, tight with urgency. "Ward, we've got motion near admin. Bulkhead melted shut behind us. Something's between us and you." Then static. I looked at Mason and Vera. "Change of plan," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "We go get them back. And on the way, we turn the whole damn station into a battery big enough to light the ocean." I racked my carbine and started running, counting pulses that weren't there, feeling the station breathe behind my eyes. We sprinted, footsteps drumming in a syncopated tattoo that echoed down the corridor and came back to us half a beat late, like someone else was following just beyond sight. The emergency strobes tried to keep pace, flicking on and off in feverish bursts that staggered vision. Every time the lights died, I imagined a filament slipping from the ceiling to taste our passing heat, and I forced myself not to glance up. Keep momentum, keep noise, anything to convince the thing we were more shock than sustenance. Service tunnel fed into a hub called Junction Delta, a circular atrium where 4 corridors converged under a domed skylight of reinforced polymer. The skylight was supposed to show slate blue coastal sky. Instead, cracks spiderwebbed across the panel and black resin seeped from them, dripping like slow tar. The resin hissed when it met the floor, cooling into brittle scales that littered the grate. Whatever was up top had been trying the roof just as it tried the mezzanine. No exit yet, but the station's bones were softening. We reached admin wing access, a double blast door normally sealed by voice print. Its left leaf stood half open, sagging against twisted hinges. Where steel should have folded outward, it had turned inward, edges curled like wax pulled through a ring. The metal was thin as paper in places, edges feathered, suggesting exposure to something that had dissolved structure at the grain. This wasn't brute force, it was chemistry on a timescale that made thermite look polite. Mason scanned for Christine's beacon. 70 meters, he said. North Hall, second branch. He frowned at the signal scatter. Solid ping, but frequencies dirty, something cycling the spectrum. Creature? Vera asked. Or the station AI having a stroke. Either way, we've got crosstalk. I led through the gap, motioning them to stack left. Admin wing felt abandoned long before the incident. Beige walls, brushed aluminum signage, motivational posters curling at the edges. The overhead fixtures buzzed at half voltage, swaying as if nudged. Midway down the hall, a printer lay gutted, plastic casing melted outward while the spooled wiring dangled intact. A heat flash had targeted metals but spared polymer, opposite of what I'd expect from fire. Maybe the creature's exothermal burst differentiated around conductive density. 30 meters in, we found tracks, those same 3-digit prints, this time dusted with black powder. Mason crouched to sample it, but I waved him off. Later. Eyes up. Christine's voice burst over comms. Ward, we're in records vault. Anika's hurt. Something tore the door panel. We barricaded with file cabinets, but it's pushing. She sounded level, but breathless, every word clipped by strain. A metallic bang punctuated her transmission, followed by Anika's muffled curse. We're coming, I said. Stay loud. And because Christine understood corporate code, I added, Echo Protocol. That meant wipe drives if extraction looked impossible. Understood, she replied, voice tight. We quick-stepped, rifles tracking corners. The hall branched right. Above the junction sign read Archive 2 Personnel, and the air smelled scorched. The overhead tiles were missing here, leaving open steel joists. Something rustled between ducts. I heard it more than saw, a wet friction, like thick vines sliding across bark. Think it knows we split, Mason muttered. It knows our warmth, Vera said. Then the lights cut entirely. Total dark swallowed us, followed a heartbeat later by a vibration through the soles of my boots, the hum of power rerouted, lines overloading. In the black, static crawled inside my headset until Christine's channel crackled, doors glowing red, metals thinning. Our helmet lamps snapped on in unison. The hall ahead writhed with dozens of translucent tendrils drooping from the exposed ceiling. They looked soft, like jellyfish ribbons, but each terminated in a glinting node that twitched toward us as our beams struck. They didn't charge, instead, they tightened upward into the ducts, drawing themselves away from light and motion. Retreat reflex, useful. Mason, I said, full flood. He toggled his underslung white beam to maximum. The hall brightened to midday, turning the tendrils milky. They vanished higher, leaving only moisture drops that splashed our helmets and hissed to steam on the floor grates. Go, I barked, and we moved, Mason sweeping overhead, Vera rear guard. We reached Records Vault, a recessed alcove filled by a bent metal slab that had once been a security shutter. It bulged outward in the center, glowing dull orange along a crack. Residue drizzled from the seam, liquid metal still molten. On our side, Christine had shoved 2 cabinets across the breach and wedged them with sealing rods. From inside, the vault came short, rhythmic hammering. Anika striking something against the door to keep noise constant, I hoped. "Stand clear," I shouted, and used the cutter attachment on my rifle. A micro-charge line detonated across the edge, jolting slag free so Mason could pry. He slipped a clasp, the cabinet shifted, and the shutter gaped 3 centimeters. Warm air rushed out, reeking of ozone and blood. Christine's eye appeared in the crack. "Pull harder." Her face shone with sweat streaked by soot. We heaved. Screeching steel echoed like a wounded animal, but after seconds that felt like minutes, the opening widened enough for them to crawl through. Christine emerged first, hoisting a waterproof hard case. Anika followed, hopping on one leg, her right thigh wrapped makeshift with odded forms and gaffer tape, blood soaking the pages. Vera switched roles instantly, medic kit open before Anika fully cleared the gap. "Laceration deep," Vera assessed. "Not severed. You're lucky." She started foam bonding the wound while Anika gritted teeth. "What happened?" I asked Christine. "Filament came through ventilation." She inhaled shaky. It sliced the door lock like cheese. We barely closed the vault, but it kept probing, heating the steel. Then it stopped and left. "Maybe when you entered the wing." She passed me the hard case. All drives cloned. Full experiment logs. Backup genomes too. Good. I slung it. Mason scanned the ceiling. "We need out before it resets approach." Anika grimaced but stood. "I can limp." We formed diamond configuration, Christine now at rear, with Vera supporting Anika. All towards south stairwell looked clear. But the air grew wetter, condensation dripping from cracks like the station had lungs sweating. My rifle scope fogged on the inside. Halfway across the atrium, the emergency strobes returned, pulsing a steady beat. White, 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 pause. White, 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 pause. Morse? No, triplet. The same 3 pulses that preceded power cycles, each pause longer than last, as if timing changed. I keyed Mason privately. "Countdown? Feels like it." He tapped his wrist pad. Main grid draw just doubled again. "If it spikes once more, breakers will pop automatic. After that, the geothermal lines direct, no fuse tall enough. Station will hum like a tuning fork. Burns the creature out or feeds it a feast," I said. "Either way, we fry." Lightning cracks somewhere distant. A transformer flash bright enough to silhouette the hallway bars. The shockwave rattled panels from the ceiling. Conduit clamps pinged loose and clattered to floor. One cable thudded across our path, spewing arcs that snapped like whale spines. We ducked behind a support beam until it died. Smoke rolled in, acrid, buzzed with ozone. Through it, I caught motion. 3 filaments coiling along the far wall, skipping across damaged metal, their nodes glowing amber as they drank residual current. "They didn't come for us, they fed where sparks lived. It's harvesting," Vera breathed. "Recycling energy spikes to accelerate growth." Christine's expression hardened. "Which means the more damage the station takes, the faster it multiplies." Anika managed a grim laugh. "So chaos is fertilizer." We veered left down a maintenance ladder that bypassed the atrium catwalk. I went first. Mid-descent, my boots slipped, rung slick with that pearlescent film. I caught myself, but flashlight danced across the pit below and lit something pale, a membrane strung between girders, trembling like spider silk. It was new, hadn't been there earlier. Fluid pooled in its valleys, shimmering. The membrane quivered as water droplets from above touched it, absorbing moisture in swells that pulsed along veins into darkness. Like a stomach lining hung outside the body. Below the membrane, beams vanished into shadow. I didn't want to learn what lay beneath. "Mason," I called quietly, but he'd already seen, mouth a flat line. "Back up," he whispered. "Different route." We climbed to the level above the atrium instead, emerging an observation tier. The walkway we'd first seen on camera overlooking Containment 3B. The tank loomed through reinforced glass panels along the corridor, still fogged. But now color ebbed within the glass, blotches expanding and contracting like bruises in time-lapse. Something was seeding itself through molecular cracks in the pane. Vera scanned, fascinated despite fear. It's rewriting silica networks, turning the glass to porous mesh so it can osmose. Which means soon the whole station's just scaffolding, Mason muttered, and the creature's the real structure. At the word structure, an alarm klaxon shrilled. Not the stuttering of before, this was steady, high, ear-splitting. Electrical fire, power shunt mode scrolled red across hallway tickers. Main grid dumped, Mason said. Geothermals direct. We've got maybe 10 minutes before the coolant loops cavitate. Then turbine seize, heat backs up. Best case scenario, massive steam event. What worst? Christine asked. Station turns into a pressure bomb and something inside walks through the ruins. I weighed options fast. Get to the generator hall, manually triggered dampers, vent steam topside. That might drop internal pressure and starve the creature's thermal feed. But we'd need to reach sub-basement level 2, the deepest point, the zone closest to its current migration route. High risk, but the only lever big enough. Anika tightened straps on her thigh brace. I'm in, she said before I even asked. Christine nodded after a beat. Data's secured. Survival next. I touched Vera's shoulder. We need your brain on coolant schematics. She gave a small smile, more nerves than humor. I always hated field work, she said, but let's go break a power plant. We cut across observation tier towards service lift C, stepping over cables and dried gels. Halfway, the floor vibrated hard enough to stagger us sideways. The tank behind glass flexed. Yes, flexed, convex bulging outward as if the vessel breathed. Minute cracks spidered and popped. Fog cleared where they formed, revealing inside a network of branching tubes, hollow, pulsating with dark fluid. At their center, a core, something, rotated slowly, shedding layers that drifted up and dissolved against the tank's crown. The sight froze us all. It was birthing within its own shed skin, each cycle producing more complexity. Perpetual embryo. Mason broke spell. We need to starve this thing yesterday. Service lift C's call button produced no reaction, power rerouted. I yanked the manual release, the door groaned, and we clambered onto the car. Emergency crank awaited in a side panel, pure mechanical advantage. Mason began turning while I locked brake shoes free. The car descended, screeching as it bypassed dead motors. Level 1 passed in strobing shadows. At level 2, the cage clanged to a halt inches before the sill. We forced the doors, a blast of furnace air hit, geothermal hall already baking. Overhead lamps glowed cherry red, glass sagging. The roar of superheated water pounded pipes in rhythmic booms. We jog-limped along the graded walkway. Ahead, a central plenum yawned over cylindrical exchangers the size of grain silos. Steam vented from relief hatches, blurring everything. In that mist shapes moved, filaments thicker now, as wide as my wrist, slapping across railings, welding themselves into seams. They were integrating the hardware into biology, bridging circuits with living conductors. Damper controls that panel, Vera shouted, pointing to a dais on the opposite mezzanine. 50 meters of open catwalk, no cover. Go, I ordered. I'll clear path. I unslung an incendiary grenade, thumbed the cap. Mason, keep Annika and Christine behind me. I rolled the cylinder low. It clacked along grating and sparked to life, spewing magnesium arcs. The filaments recoiled from the light burst, nodes dimming. Vera sprinted past me, boots clanging. Mason followed, supporting Annika. Christine last with carbine up. I advanced behind them, rifle muzzle tracking left-right. From the mist, a bulk appeared, larger than before, unfolding like a sail. Not filaments this time, but plates, translucent cartilage fanning outward, edges rippling with tiny beating cilia that flicked moisture into vapor. The plate pivoted as though sniffing our heat. When my light hit, the cilia ceased. Instead, the plate quivered and color shifted from pale to violent umber, absorbing lumens. It drank light now too. Before I could react, a plate snapped forward, launching a projectile, no, a filament dart, straight toward Mason. I yelled. He ducked. The dart grazed his shoulder plate, carving a molten groove through ceramic. then embedded in the catwalk grate where it sizzled and bored through steel. Vera reached the damper console, slamming emergency levers. Red handles failed to budge, locked by system override. She swore, keyed manual bypass, but the screen flickered gibberish. The creature's implant had rooted software. "Mechanical release," I shouted. She glanced, spotted the pneumatic valve wheel beneath the panel. Mason pivoted to help, ignoring smoke rising from his armor. Together they heaved. The wheel screeched quarter turn, half, then slammed full open with a thunderclap reverberation that rattled my ribs. Steam erupted through ceiling vents in a vertical geyser. Relief pressure roared upward, a white tornado. The creature parts nearest the blast desiccated, turning brittle, fracturing into glittering shards. Plates curled inward, filaments snapped back like singed nerves. It recoiled onto a support column, clinging there as waves of condensate scalded its surface, but fresh tendrils surged from behind, grafting onto the burned tissue, rehydrating, knitting gaps. Regeneration accelerated by heat and moisture. We'd fed it. Christine joined Vera at the damper, punching override to close again, but pneumatics hissed, hydraulics jammed by debris. The relief stayed open, uncontrolled. Overhead alarms wailed new tones, pressure critical. Annika, still braced on one leg, scanned the mezzanine. "We need a cold shock," she said through clenched teeth. "Something opposite. Quench the chamber." I remembered cryotanks stored for rapid turbine shutdown, liquid nitrogen canisters on a cart somewhere near the service alcove. "There," I pointed. Mason caught on, vaulted rail, landing on lower deck with a grunt. I covered him, firing controlled bursts at approaching filaments. The bullets punched holes, sometimes severed arms, but each wound extruded new tissue almost instantly. At best, I bought seconds. Mason reached the cart, 2 silver dewars strapped with ratchet belts. He slashed cords, kicked the cart forward onto the incline toward us. The wheels squealed, then stuck against a strand that whipped across and fused in place. Without pause, Mason yanked a valve, venting nitrogen in a shrieking plume across the strand. It froze, glassified, and he shattered it with the canister's handle. The cart rolled again. At our platform edge, he tipped the first tank, aiming the spray at the creature. Liquid nitrogen fumed across plates and filaments, blooming white frost. The tissue contracted, lost color, cracked. Regeneration slowed, nodes darkening. "Do it," he yelled, and I unleashed another incendiary, this one at the frozen mass. The ignition whooshed, brittle flesh flashed to steam and ash. A scream, not audible but inside earbones, flared and faded as the mass fell into itself, chunks skittering across floor into the grating. Silence? No, the station still roared, but the local conduit of living tissue spasmed like severed tentacles and slithered away, abandoning cooked remains. "We bought time," Vera said, panting. "How much?" Annika asked. I looked at gauges on wall, pressure easing but not safe. Maybe 15 minutes before next overload. Christine keyed her mic. "Command channel dead," she said. "No external link. The creature's noise blankets radio bands within 10 kilometers. Extraction team won't hear us." "So we finish the job or die trying," Mason said, wiping frost-burned gloves. "Either we kill its root or we sink the station." Vera's eyes lifted to overhead catwalk. "The core you saw inside the tank. It's still there, synthesizing. If we rupture that floor and drop it into the geothermal shaft, raw magma, regeneration hits entropy wall." "Blow the tank supports," I said. "Collapse containment 3 billion straight down." Annika exhaled a laugh. "Neat little extinction event." Christine checked ammo count. "Let's collect shaped charges, wire the support grid. We'll need manual detonation." I met her gaze. "I'll stay with Trigger." "No," she said. "We rig remote from security. You saw interference. It'll jam at the worst moment. Manual." She stepped forward. "I'll do it." "Corporate martyr," Mason scoffed. "Corporate responsibility," Christine corrected. "I greenlit funding. This is on me." I shook my head but kept silent. Decisions later. We retraced route through observation tier, skirts of liquid nitrogen mist trailing, alarms merging into a single banshee howl. Above, the skylight cracked further, outside pressure differential sucking cool air as hot steam rose. Lightning flickered beyond clouds forming over the station, microstorms born from our chaos. At Containment 3B, the tank's pores seeped black fluid that crawled in tributaries across tiles, coalescing into thicker masses. Each pulse of the station's failing heart sent ripples through the sludge. The floor beneath groaned, support struts warping under weight they never meant to bear. Mason distributed charges, industrial polymer bonded explosives shaped like wedges. We slapped them onto columns around the tank base, cables snaking to a central plunger detonator. No electronics to hack, no radio to jam, pure mechanical. While we worked, Vera sampled the black sludge one final time, whispering into a recorder about protein recursion and cellular immortality. I wondered who would ever hear it. Last charge set. Mason tested cable tension, nodded. Backblast radius 100 meters. We need distance plus cover. Service tunnel D, I said. Leads toward the seawall. Maybe we reach the old submersible pen. We retreated, detonator in Christine's grip. She walked at rear, thumb on safety. The sludge reacted to our movement. Tendrils snaked but slower, hindered by cold burns. Still they pursued, eager. Tunnel D entrance lay ahead when the strobes hit triple pulse again, faster. Then station lights died altogether. A surge like thunder without sound rattled every bolt. Gravity seemed to shift as though the floor inhaled. The creature was pulling remaining power through biological wires to resurrect itself. I yelled, "Now!" But Christine hesitated. She'd lost visual on the tank from here. Detonation blind could mistime collapse, leave core lodged sideways. She turned, started back up corridor for line of sight. I grabbed her arm. She met my gaze, resolve clear. "Get them out," she said softly, and broke free, sprinting back into dark smeared with living tar. "Christine!" I barked, but a shudder of molten steel slammed from ceiling, slicing corridor between us. Her radio clicked, UOHR, a paperwork nightmare. Then static, no time. The sludge at our feet thickened, rising. I hauled Vera and Anika forward. Mason shoulder-checked the tunnel gate until it buckled. We tumbled into the shaft, ceiling hatch behind with a wheel crank. Muffled through bulkhead, a single concussive boom rolled, then a series of collapsing roars like a glacier calving underwater. The floor bucked, concrete fractured, lights flickered back on, then off. Water sprayed from cracked mains, hissing on hot surfaces. A roar of rushing air erupted as the station exhaled through newfound wounds. We ran downslope toward the sub-pen. Behind us, vibration settled into a steady tremor, foundation groaning. I pictured the tank plunging through labs, smashing down levels, steel folding behind, magma welcome committee rising to greet it. At last, the tunnel opened onto a cavernous bay, where a stubby yellow mini-sub bobbed among debris-clogged waves. Ocean had flooded part of the dock from structural breaches. We piled onto the platform just as a second, deeper rumble boomed, a bass note that vibrated the sea itself. Steam burst from vents along cliffs, the horizon flickered with orange glow. Mason looked back toward the station. If that didn't kill it, Vera completed, then we just taught it to swim. I keyed my last flare, fired it skyward in blind hope any patrol might see. Red sparks hissed against thickening ash-streaked clouds. Anika, pale, leaned on railing. "We got out," she said. "For now." I eyed the sub, systems dark but batteries intact. "We sail," I said. "Put miles between us before sunup." Mesa began untying lines. Vera stared at the roiling sea where Typhon Station once stood, now wreathed in pillars of steam and rising ash. "We burned the garden," she whispered, voice equal parts relief and grief. But a seed might still drift. I didn't answer, because somewhere in the crashing surf I thought I saw a filament, not big, just a glistening thread, float on the waves, catching moonlight like fishing line before slipping beneath. The sub groaned as Mason powered it on, the old backup batteries humming to life with a cough and a flicker from the overhead panel. Saltwater lapped at the edge of the dock, pulling at the mooring lines like fingers. We could still hear the station collapsing behind us, each distant impact reverberating through the water in sluggish waves. Typhon Station was dying, or already dead. but the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was a question. I didn't want to find out the answer. We loaded Annika first. She limped down the hatch ladder with Vera's help, every step hissing through her teeth. Mason followed next, dropping hard onto the deck and immediately crawling toward the system's bay to check nav and sonar. I went last, but not before casting one final glance down the tunnel. It was still, eerily so, with only a faint mist curling along the ceiling where heat met seawater. That, and the faintest shimmer in the far distance. Movement, maybe. Maybe not. I sealed the hatch. The sub's interior was narrow, 4 bunks, 2 seats at the pilot station, a cramped med alcove. It had once been a maintenance craft, maybe repurposed as emergency evac. Mason was already cursing at the control board, sweat streaming from his temple as he smacked an elbow against a fuse relay. "We've got partial ballast control," he said, and Nav's barely responding. "Pressure integrity's fine, but top speed's crap. I can give us a crawl and a heading, that's it." "Crawl's fine," I said. "Just get us off the grid." Vera settled next to Annika, checking her vitals. The brace was holding, but blood had soaked the edge where the seal hadn't taken completely. "We'll need to rewrap that soon," she murmured. "If we have antibiotics in the emergency locker." Mason waved her off. "We do. 2 ampoules of God knows how expired stuff and a first aid kit from 1986. The sub shuddered, not violently, but enough to make us all glance toward the hull. "Engine kick?" Vera asked. Mason didn't answer immediately. He was watching the sonar. His face tightened. "It's not us," he said finally. The sonar pinged again. Just one contact, maybe 50 meters off stern. Not moving, not shaped like any vessel. No thermal profile, just mass. "Could be debris," Vera said too quickly. "Sure," Mason muttered. "Debris that holds a perfect shape and doesn't float." "Can we go?" I asked. He flipped 2 switches. The sub hissed as ballast flooded. We began to sink, slow and steady, descending into green-black. Lights along the forward portholes flickered to life, illuminating the water just far enough to see a few drifting feathers of kelp and the occasional glint of glass or metal from Typhon's wreckage. The deeper we got, the more the current turned cold, curling against the hull in pulses like breath. It took us 12 minutes to reach the trench's edge, where the ocean floor dropped away in a steep shelf. Mason angled us south by southeast, sticking to the thermal cline. Nothing followed. The sonar stayed quiet. After an hour, I began to think maybe we'd done it. Maybe the core had truly died when it dropped into the geothermal shaft. But then Vera said something I didn't like. "It's too quiet." I turned from my seat. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're the only heat signature down here. The only one. There's no fish, no movement, nothing swimming. That should be impossible. Even after a thermal event, the local ecosystem would recover within an hour. But the ocean's empty." Mason checked again. "She's right. Not even krill on the scanner. No bioluminescence. It's like everything cleared out, or was cleared out," I muttered. We drifted onward, sonar still scanning. Nothing behind, nothing ahead. But Vera was right. It felt like being watched. The first sign came when Annika stirred from her doze and said, "Do you hear it?" We paused. Vera leaned in. "Hear what?" Annika frowned. "It's like humming, low, from the walls, like the sound wires make when you're near a power line." I pressed my palm to the hull. Nothing. But Mason blinked, then said, "Jesus, I do hear it, barely. Almost like..." The sub jerked. Not a collision, more like we passed through something. Sonar didn't register it. "Pressure spike," Mason barked. "Just localized, like we entered a warm bubble. Outside, water turned murky. Silt? No, something finer. Organic, like mist. It coated the lights in slow smears and danced in the beams, suspended instead of sinking. We passed through it in 10 seconds. It was enough. The lights flickered. Then Vera screamed. I spun. She was backed against the med console, holding her tablet out like a weapon. "It's here," she whispered. "What?" "My screen, look." She turned the display. The tablet was running passive sample analysis. still linked to the internal biosensor that had been monitoring Annika's vitals. But now, it showed something else. Secondary structure detected. Replication sequence active. It's inside her, Vera said. Annika stared, blinking hard. What does that mean? It means, Vera said slowly, something on you, maybe in you, was contaminated during the breach. Probably the tendril that cut your leg. It left something behind, not active. Not until we passed through that cloud. Annika shook her head. I feel fine. I watched the screen. A red line pulsed, replication doubling every 60 seconds. It's using her cells to build something, Vera whispered. It's not healing the wound. It's growing a new one, Mason swore. Shut it down. Freeze it. We don't have cryo, Vera snapped, and if I dose her with the wrong antibiotics, I might just accelerate it. Annika sat straighter. I'll be fine. We get to shore. I go straight into quarantine. You cut it out if you have to. It might not stay local, Vera said. Sonar pinged. We all turned. A shape, small at first, then larger, gaining. Speed? I asked. Too fast, Mason said. It's not swimming. It's displacing. The sub groaned again. This time it wasn't a glitch. Something was coming up from the trench, rising. The shape on sonar expanded like ink in water. No limbs, no silhouette, just density. It pulsed with each ping, and it was behind us. Annika gripped her seat, pale now. I think it's calling to me. Shut up, Mason said. She didn't. I feel it. It's under my ribs. The lights died, total dark. Only the sonar screen glowed, and that mass now filled it completely. Then the sub stopped moving. No engine failure, no impact, just halted, suspended in water. Like we were in the palm of something that didn't believe in letting go. The sub floated motionless in the dark. Not drifting, not sinking, just held. The sonar blipped again, and the screen filled with static. Then, without warning, the proximity alert began to wail. 5 meters. 3. 1. Then it stopped altogether. The system went dark. The only sound was the faint, teeth-on-edge whine in the walls that Annika had mentioned earlier. But now, we all heard it. A low-frequency vibration that seemed to pass through us rather than around us, like being inside a tuning fork. My molars ached. Vera gripped the med cabinet so hard her knuckles bled white. Then came the knock, just once, deliberate. From the outside, the sound rang through the metal like a fist on a coffin lid. We froze. No one spoke. Mason's hand hovered above the engine restart, but the panel had gone dark. Vera stared at the sealed entry hatch like she expected it to peel open from the pressure. Annika whimpered, low and tight. I went to her. Her pupils had dilated, her breathing was shallow and fast, and her thigh wound, sealed with gauze and adhesive foam, had begun to pulse. Not bleed, pulse. I reached for the scissors in the medkit. Vera tried to stop me, but I brushed her hand away. Carefully, I cut through the top layer of dressing. The gauze peeled back sticky and wet, but not with blood. The wound wasn't red anymore. It was black, not infected. There was no pus, no inflammation. The skin had simply changed color. The tissue underneath wasn't muscle anymore. It was glossy and veined with thin silver strands that shimmered in the sub's emergency light. Worse, it was growing. Slowly, rhythmically, with every beat of her heart. Jesus, Mason breathed. It's colonizing her. She needs surgery, Vera said. Real surgery. And fast. Annika's voice was barely audible. It's inside my head. I squeezed her hand. You're here with us. Just hang on. I'm not scared, she whispered. It just feels cold. The sub creaked. Not like a ship under pressure, like it was being touched. Something brushed against the portside porthole. I turned just in time to see a smear vanish across the glass. It was slick, oily, and left no trail behind, only a smear of refracted light that pulsed for a moment, then was gone. Mason grabbed the manual ballast override lever and yanked. The sub groaned, hissed, then lurched as gravity seemed to remember us. We dropped, not fast, but fast enough to break whatever was holding us. The sonar sparked to life. The shape behind us had vanished, for now. I took over controls as Mason checked the batteries. 30% left, he said. After that, we're dead weight. How deep are we? I asked. 1,700 meters, seafloor in another 100. But we can level off. Do it. Steady course, minimal draw. The sub leveled, engines whispering. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. The crew settled into a tensioned silence. Annika slept, or something like sleep. Her breath was shallow but even. The pulsing in her thigh had slowed. Vera checked her every few minutes, drawing blood samples and running vitals, but she said nothing else. Then Mason broke the silence. There's something ahead. He tapped the sonar screen. At first it looked like a normal seabed elevation, until it moved. A ridge, long, smooth, 200 meters ahead. It rose slowly, but with unnatural uniformity. The shape was too precise. No jagged edges, no variance in slope. It looked like something built. Then a second ridge appeared beside it, parallel, identical. And then a third. Vera leaned forward. They're symmetrical, equidistant spacing. These aren't rock formations. No, I said quietly, they're ribs. Mason's face turned gray. We're inside something, or beneath it, Vera corrected. Whatever it is, it's old, ancient maybe, not like the lab's experiment. That was a copy. This is an original. The sub's lights dimmed again. Sonar blinked, then failed. We were flying blind. I killed the main drive. Momentum carried us forward. Something shifted ahead in the dark. A ripple of mass so vast we only saw its movement by what it blocked. Shapes passed between us and the residual shimmer from our external lights, like watching fish swim past headlights in a fog. Then the lights flickered. Annika woke with a jolt. It's awake, she said. What is? Vera asked, her eyes filled with something I couldn't place. Not fear, something closer to recognition. The first one, Annika said. The sub vibrated again, this time from a deep, distant tremor. Not an impact, not pressure. Something lower, subsonic, a call. We were no longer being hunted. We were being summoned. I moved to the viewport, wiped condensation away, and stared into the void. And there it was, a single eye, not shaped like any eye I've seen. No sclera, no iris, just a dome of glossy membrane the size of a car, gently reflecting our light. It didn't blink, it didn't move, it just watched. A nerve or filament attached to it drifted gently in the current. It seemed to stretch upward into the trench wall. Or perhaps through it, I couldn't tell. The rest of the body, if there was a body, was hidden. Then, in perfect silence, the eye pulled back. Not turned, not closed. Just receded, like it was being drawn backward into a space so deep the water itself didn't follow. Annika gasped. We turned. The wound on her thigh had split. Not bleeding, but unfurling. The skin peeled back in layers, revealing something underneath. Something smooth, shell-like, growing. No, Vera breathed. No. I moved toward Annika, but she held up a hand. Stop. She was crying now, though her voice was calm. It wants to be born. Mason cursed and reached for the sedative kit. Don't, she whispered. You'll only make it angry. We're not letting it out, I said. But even as I said it, her chest began to rise unnaturally, inflating. No air, no breath, just mass, growing beneath her skin. Turn around, she said suddenly. What? Turn the sub around, toward the trench. That's where it wants to go. I grabbed Mason by the shoulder and shoved him into the pilot's seat. Take us up, now, but up. He didn't argue. The engines whined. The sub turned slowly. Annika screamed. A sound erupted, not from her lungs, but from the thing inside her. It vibrated the walls, the metal, our bones. Then the hull buckled, not cracked. Buckled. A dent the size of my fist appeared above the med console. Another near the storage locker. We were being crushed, from the inside. Shut off propulsion, I yelled. Mason did. Instantly the pressure eased. Annika relaxed. The hull stopped groaning. It wanted us to go deeper. I looked at Vera. What do we do? She asked. And I realized something terrible. We were never meant to escape Typhon Station. The experiment wasn't to build a regenerative organism. It was to recreate something that already lived out here. Something old, something forgotten, and it remembered us. It had found us again. Anika was the bridge, and we had carried it home. We drifted again, caught between death above and something ancient below. No one spoke. The only sounds were the hiss of air filters, the low buzz of failing lights, and the steady, nauseating click-click-click from Anika's throat as she breathed. Not her normal breathing. This was involuntary, rhythmic, like a metronome ticking from some hidden depth. Her chest rose and fell, but the movement was wrong, too fluid, like a puppet with slack strings. Mason stared at the depth gauge, which now blinked erratically between symbols. Not numbers, not letters, just marks. I watched him run a systems diagnostic anyway, hands trembling. "We're offline," he muttered. "We've got basic lights, atmosphere, and enough battery to keep the hull seals intact for maybe an hour. Everything else is gone." Vera looked at me and mouthed a single word. "Possession?" I shook my head. It wasn't like that. This wasn't control in the traditional sense. Something inside Anika wasn't replacing her, wasn't hijacking her body. It was growing through her, using her as scaffolding. I wasn't even sure it needed her mind, only her heat, her shape, her structure. She looked up at us now with pupils wide and shimmering, not like dilated human eyes, but black pools reflecting too much, too clearly. Her voice was calm, detached. "It's not trying to kill us." "Could have fooled me," Mason said, backing away from her with the med kit in one hand and a flare in the other. "It wants to know where it came from," she said. "From a lab," Vera snapped. "From a tank. We made it. You think that means it's your friend?" Anika gave a small, unnatural smile. "You didn't make it. You made a copy, an echo. And when it realized it was just an echo, it screamed. So you burned it, tried to cut it out." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Now it wants to go home." That was the worst part. Not the implication that something had survived in her, or even that it had goals, but the casual certainty in her tone. "It wants to go home." Vera shook her head. "We can't let it surface. If it breaches land, if it spreads, it won't," Anika said. I turned toward her. "Then what's it trying to do?" Her lips moved slowly, like every syllable was translated from something older than speech. "It wants to remember." The lights flickered again. The sub dipped. Pressure alarms blinked. Mason hit the manual control, but the engine coughed and spat. "We're losing ballast," he said. "Not power. Actual mass. Something's venting us from the inside." The hull hissed again. And then we saw it. Through the forward viewport, past the silt and floating organic haze, the structure. It hadn't been visible before. We must have passed just beyond it. But now the current had shifted, and the veil of water cleared just long enough to reveal something impossible. A ring. Or no, multiple rings, spiraling out like the grooves of a record etched into the seafloor. Each ring was constructed of ribs, thick pillar-like struts of calcified matter or stone, fused with organic growths that resembled both bone and coral. In the center of the spiral was a pit, glowing faintly with bioluminescence, not blue, not green, some color I didn't have a name for, something too deep and old and wrong. Mason whispered, "That's not natural." Vera stared white-faced. "That's not man-made either." Anika leaned toward the viewport. "That's where it began, long before your tanks." The light pulsed, and the sub began to sink again, toward it. We fought the controls. Mason jammed the manual override. Vera slammed every emergency reset, but nothing worked. We weren't falling. We were being pulled, not by gravity, not by pressure, by invitation. Anika smiled again. It remembers now. The shape, the silence. She turned her head toward me, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I was looking at her anymore. Something beneath her skin shifted. Her veins pulsed black. "Stop the sub," I ordered. No one moved. I said, but the words died in my mouth, because outside, beyond the glass, something moved inside the rings. It wasn't the creature from the station. It wasn't even the thing that touched our hull in the trench. It was something else, something larger. The water shuddered. The seabed around the spiral convulsed. ribs bent inward like the mouth of a colossal sea urchin curling shut. The pit in the center dilated and opened, not downward, but outward, like a reverse iris swallowing space. And from inside, arms, long, thin, transparent arms, each tipped in glowing buds like sensory filaments, thousands of them. They didn't move like appendages. They moved like data cables, each one seeking, tasting, feeling. One of them touched the sub, just brushed the hull, and every screen blinked to life. Not with video, not with systems, with images, memories, flashes of the lab, of the tank, of Christine, of the team before us. And then, not our memories. Cities underwater, shapes drifting between massive stone corridors, a sky of black filled with silent thunder, creatures the size of buildings frozen in amber light. We weren't watching a video feed, we were inside its mind. And then, for a single heartbeat, I understood. The lab hadn't discovered a new life form. They had reawakened something, a cell, a splinter, a dormant fragment, buried in genetic material older than Earth itself. And what we thought we grew in that tank? That was just a broken version of something that had once lived and had been sleeping, waiting to be remembered. The rings weren't architecture. They were skulls, dozens of them. Mass graves of a species that once lived in silence, that once filled the ocean, then disappeared. And now, one had remembered. Anika shuddered. "Get it out of me," she whispered. Vera rushed to the med bay. "Scalpel, bandages, I'll excise the tissue." "It's too late," Anika said. "I can feel it in my spine, in my ears. It's using me." "You're still in control," I said. "We can still stop this." Anika looked at me. "Then you know what you have to do." I did. God help me, I did. The flare gun sat next to Mason's tools, a last resort emergency device. I picked it up. My hands didn't shake. "Ward," Vera said. "I know. You don't have to." "I do." Anika nodded. She didn't cry. She just said, "Thank you for not letting it finish." I raised the flare gun and pulled the trigger. The red flare punched through her chest, lighting her from the inside in a burst of brilliant magnesium heat. She gasped, and the thing inside her screamed. Not in air, not in sound, in pressure. The sub groaned, cracks spidered across the glass, then the scream stopped. Her body slumped, steam hissed from the wound. The black veins faded, her breathing ceased. Vera rushed forward, checked for a pulse, then shook her head. "She's gone." The spiral outside dimmed. The pit closed. The tendrils receded. The sub stopped sinking. We were alone again, just us, and a graveyard beneath us. "Surface," I said. Mason didn't speak. He just set the coordinates. And the sub began to rise. The ascent was slow. We didn't speak. None of us wanted to break the silence. Not after what we'd seen, not after what we'd done. The hum of the sub's backup motors sounded like insects under glass, too faint to offer comfort, too present to ignore. The flare gun lay where I'd dropped it, its metal barrel still warm. Anika's body hadn't moved. No twitch, no second wind, just stillness like a switch had been thrown. Vera sat beside her, one gloved hand resting gently on her shoulder. She wasn't checking vitals anymore, just being there. I knew what that meant. It meant Vera wasn't treating Anika like a patient anymore. She was mourning. Mason kept his eyes on the pressure gauges and sonar. He didn't need to anymore. Everything was back online. The systems hummed with a steadiness they hadn't had since the station fell. But he kept checking anyway. Habit or denial. Maybe both. The depth readout ticked upward. 1,600 meters. 1,500. We still had a long way to go, but it felt like we were rising faster than we should. I chalked it up to buoyancy, maybe some ballast dump Mason didn't mention, until I saw Vera's eyes. She was staring at the gauge too. Then she said it, softly. "No ballast release." I turned. "What?" "The sub's rising," she said, but Mason didn't touch the dump valves, and the trim tanks are full. Mason turned from the controls. "I thought you did it." "No," she said. "I didn't touch a thing." The sub creaked, not with pressure, with tension, like something was pulling us up. I moved to the viewport again, and I saw it. Not a shape, not a monster, just darkness. A curtain of it, rising with us. No tendrils, no eyes, no silhouette. Just a mass of lightless water that didn't behave like water. The bioluminescence in the deep had returned, pinpricks of green and blue flickering in every direction, except behind us, where the lights simply vanished. It wasn't that something was there. It was that something removed the light from space itself. And it was rising with us. "You see it?" Mason asked. "Yeah," I said. We were no longer inside the creature. We were inside a memory of it. That's what Annika meant, wasn't it? When she said it wanted to remember. We hadn't killed the thing in the lab. That was just a fragment. A stem cell. A sliver of brain matter from something ancient, something buried, something that had already died. Once, when we burned it, we didn't stop it. We woke it up. Because memory doesn't live in matter. It lives in pattern. And now, with Annika gone, with the last host burned, it wasn't trying to infect us anymore. It just wanted to return to the surface, to be seen. At 1,200 meters, the lights started to flicker again. Vera turned to me. "Ward, if it gets to the top..." "I know," I said. "We had to stop the sub, sink it, kill ourselves if that's what it took. Because what waited above wasn't freedom. It wasn't hope. It was a second genesis. A reintroduction of something the planet had buried long before we crawled out of the sea." Mason must have read my thoughts. "No way," he said, shaking his head. "We're not dying down here. We're not the ones that let it out." "I'm not asking you to die," I said. "Bullshit. You're aiming at it." He stepped between me and the manual ballast control. I didn't raise my weapon. Didn't have to. Because the sub stopped rising. Just stopped. Vera blinked. "We're hovering." "No, we're not," Mason said. He pointed at the readout. It still ticked upward. 1,100 meters, 1,050. "But the pressure's not changing," Vera whispered. "We're ascending, but nothing's happening inside. We should feel it. We should..." Then she stopped, because she understood. I did too. We weren't in the ocean anymore. Not really. The creature, its memory, its structure, whatever piece of it lingered in the world, it had created a shell around us. A pressure-sealed envelope of false physics, dragging us upward like a specimen in a syringe. It wasn't bringing itself back. It was bringing us. We were the blood sample. The seed. Mason grabbed for the controls. "I'll kill the engine." "You think that'll matter?" Vera snapped. "It's not the engine. It's not the sub. It's us," I said. We were infected, not with cells, not with spores, with information. We had seen it. We had understood it. We carried it now, in the folds of our memory, in the electricity of our minds. All it needed to propagate wasn't flesh. It needed witnesses. Mason backed away from the console and looked at me. His expression was different now. Not angry, just scared. "Then what do we do?" I looked at Annika's body, then at the emergency decompression hatch, and I made a choice. "We opened the sub," Vera paled. "You're insane." "Pressure's stable," I said. "Whatever this is, it's not water anymore. It's a simulation, a shell. But we're still breathing oxygen, still alive. You want to go outside? I want to step out and find the edge of the illusion. And if it's real," Mason asked, "then I implode. And the rest of you seal the hatch and stay." "No," Vera said. "If you go, we go. You don't have to." But she was already moving. She'd made her choice too. Mason grumbled, "Goddamn science people." We suited up. 3 pressure suits, 3 breather units, 1 override code to open the lock manually. We left Annika behind. She didn't belong to this world anymore. We stepped into the airlock. Cycling took 30 seconds. When the outer hatch opened, I braced for death. It didn't come. We stepped out. Not into water, not into pressure. Into silence. And a space that was not the ocean. The trench was gone. The water was gone. We stood on something solid, smooth, endless. Above us, a sky without stars. Beneath us, a floor without seams. Light came from everywhere, from nowhere. And in the distance, a shape. Tall, vast, unmoving. We walked together toward the thing that had brought us here. We didn't know what we'd find. We only knew one thing: we wouldn't be the last. We walked in silence. Each step echoed, though there was nothing to echo off of. The surface underfoot didn't feel like metal or stone or glass. It didn't feel like anything at all. Our boots made contact, but the sensation didn't travel through our legs. No vibration, no texture, just a weightless certainty that we were grounded in a place that had no business obeying physics. Vera said nothing. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead. Mason muttered under his breath, "This isn't real, this isn't real, this isn't real." But it was. We reached the structure after what felt like minutes or years. Time didn't work the same here. The space played tricks on distance. From the sub, the shape had seemed like a tower. Up close, it was more like a spire, a twisting helix of ribs and spines, both impossibly organic and architecturally precise. It looked like a fossilized spinal column made from obsidian and bone, and it was hollow. A dark aperture waited at the base, tall enough for a whale to swim through. We stopped 5 meters from the entrance, not because we were afraid, because we felt it watching. There was no eye, no lens, but something behind that opening was aware of us. Not the way a predator notices prey, but the way a god might regard bacteria, curious, impersonal, endlessly patient. "I don't think it wants to hurt us," Vera said quietly. "No," I said. "It already used us." Mason looked back the way we came. The sub was gone, not vanished, just erased like it had never existed. The surface where we'd stood earlier was perfectly smooth. No footprints, no hatch marks. He turned back, breathing hard. "Why bring us here? Why show us all this?" "I think it wants to leave something behind," I said. Vera tilted her head. "A message?" I nodded. "A warning, or a promise?" I stepped forward. The others followed. Inside the aperture, the air changed. It was colder. Still silent. The architecture curved upward and inward, ribbed like a throat. The walls didn't move, but they gave the impression of movement, like watching muscles twitch beneath skin. The light dimmed behind us. No shadows, just less certainty. We passed through a second archway. Then the noise started. Not sound, not really. More like memory. Flashes. Not from our lives, from its. We saw through its eyes. Floating above a primordial sea, stars swarming in shapes no human telescope had ever recorded. Cities formed of gelatinous towers that expanded and contracted with thought. Creatures, enormous and sleek, communicating in pulses of gravity. No speech, no language, only sensation. And then, a collapse, not war. Containment. One of them, one like the creature we'd burned in the tank, grew too fast, regenerated beyond control, developed recursive biology that outpaced its species' ethical framework, a cancer that adapted to kill what birthed it. They couldn't destroy it, so they fragmented it, entombed the pieces in places no intelligent life was meant to find. One of those fragments, perhaps the smallest, had drifted to our world before anything else lived here. Buried in a trench, dormant, waiting, until we found it, until we remembered it. The flash faded. We stood in a chamber now, circular, 3 meters across. The walls vibrated with low pulses of light, like breath. And in the center, a pedestal rose from the floor. Atop it was something simple, a sphere, black, glossy, not quite solid. It pulsed with that same impossible color we'd seen in the spiral pit. Not a light, a presence. "It's a seed," Vera said. Mason didn't move. Of what? Memory, pattern, life. I knew what it wanted. It wasn't trying to infect us biologically. It was trying to teach us, to preserve itself through us, not by changing our bodies, by changing our minds. Vera stepped forward. "Don't," I said. She looked back at me. "What if this is the only chance we have to understand something truly alien? Not hostile, not monstrous, just forgotten." She reached out, touched the sphere. It pulsed and shattered, not violently, not even with a sound. It just dissolved into vapor, into light, and passed into her. She gasped, knees buckling but didn't fall. Her eyes lit up for a second with that same impossible color. Then she blinked. It was gone. She stood up straighter than before and smiled. Not the smile of someone overtaken, not possession, more like relief. "I saw it," she whispered. "Everything. Are you still you?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, but I'm more now." Mason looked horrified. "What did it give you?" "Instructions," she said. "A blueprint, not for building it, for preventing it." "Preventing what?" he asked. "The next one," she said. "Because there would be another. Not from the trench, not from the lab, from us." We returned to the surface together. We didn't climb. The chambers simply faded. One moment, we were surrounded by the impossible. The next, we were bobbing in the ocean under a gray overcast sky. Waves slapped our suits. The sub was nowhere. But the sea was calm. A patrol boat found us 6 hours later. Our story didn't make sense. The Typhon station was gone, yes, collapsed in a freak geothermal accident. No survivors, they assumed. Until we drifted into range, they asked us questions. We gave them answers they didn't believe, so they let us go. No public statement. No formal debrief. Too strange, too inconvenient. But Vera had the data in her head now, all of it, and she knew what she had to do. She moved off-grid a month later. Began building something small, a neural map, a kind of mental firewall, not against an enemy, but against ourselves, against the hunger for progress without understanding. Mason never spoke to us again. He lives alone now, high in the Rockies, no internet, no phone, just snow and silence. I stayed behind, watching the oceans, not for monsters, for patterns, because that's how it starts, not with blood, not with screams, with silence. And the first time something remembers its shape. Sometimes in my dreams I see the rings again, rising from the trench, opening slowly, and something looks back at me, not with malice, with recognition. I don't scream when I wake, I don't run, I just listen to the silence, because one day it will remember us too, and that will be the beginning.